In a way, like you are reading but speaking to it.
Fantastic. That's very clear. After your presentation, members are going to ask you questions, maybe to seek further clarifications. So we may require you to reserve sufficient time for us. At this stage, the floor is yours, Ms. Colleen Zamba, if you may give us your testimony in response to the summons that you received. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and the Honorable Committee. First of all, let me also take this opportunity to thank you, Honorable Chair and your committee, allowing me to appear before the committee virtually and also accommodating my medical schedule. So I'm very grateful for that. And I have submitted my presentation will be in two parts. I make this written submission pursuant to the summons to a witness dated 24th June 2026, issued under Section 63 of the Constitution, Section 9 of the National Assembly Powers and Privileges Act, and Standing Order 151. This submission addresses in turn each of the matters set out in the summons and is followed by a chronology of events for the assistance of the committee. Honorable Chair, as per the summons, number one, the capacity in which the late Vice President traveled to Nkatabe. The late Vice President attended the funeral of late Kasambara in his personal capacity. The minister delegated to attend the funeral at the time was the Minister of Local Government and Development, Honorable Chimwendo. However, upon being made aware that the Vice President was going to attend, protocol demanded that he becomes the guest of honor and the senior government representative at the funeral because of the protocol arrangements. The second item on the summons is planning and coordination of the late Vice President's travel. Planning and coordination of the Vice President's travel were handled directly by the Office of the Vice President. And communication between the Office of the President and Cabinet and the Office of the Vice President was maintained primarily through Lucky Sikwesi, who was the Principal Secretary in the Office of the Vice President, and provided some updates on the Vice President's travel status, including confirmation of his return from overseas travel in South Korea, his program to proceed to Nkatabe, and confirmation that he would be traveling by plane and that he would return the same day to see the sixth president of Dr. Lazarus Makate Chakwera, who was leaving that afternoon for Bahamas. The third item on the summons, chronology of events, approvals obtained, and institutional arrangements. A day-to-day chronology of events, approvals obtained, and institutional arrangements preceding and following the journey is set out in Part 2 of the submission, to which the committee is respectively referred later. The role of the OPC in procurement of the aircraft. Office of the President and Cabinet did not have any direct nor indirect law in the procurement of the aircraft used for the late Vice President travel to the funeral. All logistics and travel arrangements pertaining to the Vice President's journey were handled by the Office of the Vice President. Furthermore, the Office of the President and Cabinet did not have any role in the procurement of the aircraft used in the conveyance of the remains of the late Mr. Raf Kasambara SC. The role played by the OPC in connection with this funeral was the provision of condolence money, which was delivered by the OPC accountant to the Secretary to the Vice President. Actually, the involvement mainly was because Honorable Kasambara was a former cabinet minister. Other relevant information pertaining to these events surrounding the late Vice President's attendance to the funeral, including the events of 10th and 11th June following the loss of contact with the aircraft, is set out fully in Part 2 of the submission below. I now come to the Part 2, Honorable Chairman and Committee. I decided to put it in a day-by-day chronology of events because it was easier and simpler for me and also for user-friendly. Number one, in the late morning of 8th June, on a Saturday, I learned of the passing of Mr. Rafka Sambara, SC, but it was through social media reports. I subsequently contacted Mr. Mwanga, who was the Deputy Inspector General of Police, to ascertain the circumstances relating to the social media reports and also confirm, because as a senior person, I wouldn't want just to pick things without confirmation with the right authorities. So he advised me that yes, I think there was discussions of a post-mortem investigation likely to be conducted, and that indeed that death had taken place and police was aware. But he didn't have sufficient information on the cause of death, and investigations were going on. There was also no clarity yet in terms of the exact location of the funeral, but that there were probably family consultations underway, since there was an uncertainty as to whether burial would be in Blantyre or in Katabe. So based on that, in my own, now as a person, it was in my considered view that probably then burial would not be quick. If they are going to do post-mortem or carry the body maybe to Blantyre, then Katabe. So that was my thinking. The same afternoon, I contacted the clerk to cabinet to actually find out whether preparations for memo have started, whether he had heard about the funeral and preparations for memo, because being a former cabinet minister, military honors would be there. But there was, of course, uncertainty as to how to proceed, knowing that Honorable Kasambara had a court conviction, raising the question whether he would be entitled to the military honors. So with that information, I consulted the Minister of Justice on the correct procedure and whether military honors would apply or not. And the Minister of Justice advised me that the decision on military honors was the President's prerogative and was not only dependent on whether there had been a conviction. In that case, I relayed back to the clerk to cabinet and I advised him that regardless of the conviction actually, which was there as a discussion between us, the matter of military honors remained the presidential prerogative, and that OPC's duty to provide condolence money and government representation, given that Honorable Kasambara was a former minister, we still had that obligation. So following this, of course, they did the initial draft, but I finally finalized it and submitted a memo to the President, notifying him of Mr. Kasambara's passing and also seeking approval on 3 matters. Number one, it was military honors to be granted to the late Kasambara as his prerogative. Number 2, recommendation that Honorable Richard Chimwendo represent the government at the funeral. And number 3, release of condolence money, which the clerk to cabinet had advised me was 5 million kwacha to the family. So the President approved these 3 requests. On Sunday, I had traveled initially to Area 25. There was a Sunday paper in the morning. It was a big function. But thereafter, I went to my village because I was preparing my mother's tombstone the following week, unveiling. So while I was there on my way, I saw on social media, I think, that contrary to my area assumption, the funeral of late Kasambara burial was going to take place the following day on a Monday in Katabe. And also comments circulating that Vice President would be attending. So, of course, it made me like, since I had that assumption initially, I didn't really pay much attention that it would be maybe a few days away. This now made me relate to a panic a bit because then I had to follow up. So knowing that I was away whole day, I first of all tried to find out whether there was any memo which had come to the house as feedback from the President, because sometimes State House would call, my assistant would go collect memos and deliver them at the house. So there wasn't, and when I followed up, and before following up with the President, I called the PS in the Vice President's office, like Sikwese, to check with him whether the Vice President was indeed back in the country and whether he would attend the funeral. His response was that sanabange chiganizo. So I said, okay, mugabanga chiganizo, then mutiuze. My main reason actually within me was to establish, for protocol purposes, that if the Vice President was going as the most senior member of cabinet, then he should be accorded the right protocol to avoid a situation where the most senior government guest would be a minister in the presence of a Vice President. That is, it's out of order. So this was really my main concern. So when I reached home, that was around, I think, 5-6 p.m. because I was on the way from the village going to Lilongwe. I also sent a message to the President following up on the memo that had been sent to his office the previous night, which was a Saturday night, and he indeed responded that he had already cleared the memo and that probably delay to reach me was that being a Sunday, his team was not in office. So he confirmed that we were to proceed with the condolence money and with Honorable Chimwendo to traveling to represent government. Between approximately 7, because remember it was between 5 and 6 I was coming from the village, but I think between 7 and 9, I don't recall much in terms of the exact times because my phone is still in the custody of police and I've not been able to use it to help me jog in my memory and find some of the conversation I was making that time. But what I recall, to the best of my recollection, is that I made and had received a series of calls regarding the funeral arrangements between that period. First, I had called the clerk to cabinet to inform him that the funeral was in fact indeed the next day and that we needed to expedite processing of the money and the other required arrangements. I also, then I got also Mr. Sikwese subsequently called me back to inform me that yes, the Vice President would indeed travel and that he would be traveling by plane. So following this, I called Honorable Chimwendo to convey that the Vice President would be attending and would therefore represent government. But we discussed that he should still proceed to the funeral and support the Vice President. So the issue was now the travel, since the Vice President was traveling by plane, and it was, okay, let me find out if he can just join the Vice President on the plane. So I called Mr. Sikwese again regarding a seat for Honorable Chimwendo. But he told me there was no space available on the aircraft, as then Madam Mary Chilima was also going, and he said even him, the PS, would not be traveling on the plane. I therefore conveyed this to Honorable Chimwendo, and we agreed that he should just travel by road, start off maybe around 4 a.m. I also received a call from the Attorney General, Thabo Nyirenda, who was seeking to find out whether military honors would be granted, and he was actually asking me to write a memo to His Excellency the President, then requesting the same. And but after his call, I also got a call from the President who informed me that, of course, he had decided that military honors should be given to late Kasambara. So following this, I called the clerk to cabinet again to ask him in terms of protocol, that what is the procedure for arranging military honors. He advised that the first step would be to speak to the legal officer at the Malawi Defense Force so that they begin the process. So I instructed him that he should proceed to call the MDF legal, inform him the directive on military honors, and also proceed with the required and necessary processes. Knowing that it was already in the night on Sunday, I said he should send a WhatsApp message, he should make a call, and that he advised that letters will go in the morning once we are in the office to confirm what we had sent. I also personally sent a message directly to the MDF commander, informing him that the President had directed that the late Kasambara should be given the military honors. So this was on Sunday night. On Monday, 10th June, in the morning, like around 8 a.m., I think, I received a call from the MDF commander informing me that since the funeral was now involving military honors, then the Minister of Defense may be representing government. But I informed him that this would not be proper procedure, as a vice president was going there, and as per cabinet protocol, this was the most senior member of cabinet proceeding to the funeral and would be the one then to represent government. I subsequently received a call also from Minister of Defense, then Honorable Nkandawire, who informed me that he would be representing the government at the funeral, that the president had called him directly and instructed him to do so. But I also informed him that no, since now we have new information developments that the vice president was going to attend, cabinet protocol required that the vice president represent government. I continued with my normal government business, which included proceeding to State House to meet His Excellency the President, as the President was leaving that afternoon, and among other matters to inform him of the Vice President's travel to the funeral and the changes, which I had made as per protocol. My normal practice, actually, when I have a briefing meeting with the President, I call people again to confirm the position on things which I'm here to brief the President. So before I entered the office of the President, I called Mr. Sikwesi again, and the idea was to confirm with him that has the Vice President indeed traveled to the funeral. He said, oh yes, I believe he was just looking at the time. So I was in the President's office for approximately an hour plus, and among other matters I discussed with him government business, I informed him, I informed him that the Vice President was back in the country from South Korea, and that he had gone to Katabe for the funeral, that he would come back to meet him and see him off. And at that point, I also took advantage to ask His Excellency that whether he had also delegated Honorable Nkandawire, to which he responded that that would be irrelevant if the Vice President is there, the most senior person would naturally be the one representing. Actually, he spoke in Chicha or Munkuraga figure. Upon exiting the President's office, I can't recall exactly, but I got to either it was on, because normally I would still go browse, Facebook just to see what is going on. I don't know whether it was there. I saw that the Vice President's plane had been unable to land due to bad weather in Nzuzu and was returning back to Lilongwe. So I attempted to call Mr. Sikwesi, the PS, but was unable to reach him due to poor network connectivity, because between the gate of State House and the other second gate and in that river, normally the network is bad. So we're failing to speak to each other. But I sent him a brief message apologizing for my inavailability and the network issues. This was around 12, I think past 12, because I stayed in the President's office almost an hour plus. So there were several things I needed to do before leaving. I had planned to leave for the airport at 4 to see the President off, but there were several things I needed to do before that time. So when I came to my office, I continued with my government business, called a few people who I was giving them some instructions, the PS of HR, the PS Finance, the Director Legal, and there was also the Special Advisor to the President, Mr. Chivunde. So I had sent these other people to do some press releases. The other one was to do a memo. The other one, it was letters of appointment. But then my executive assistant came. At that time, I was now remaining with Mr. Chifunde in the office. So my executive assistant came and says, Madam, airport commandant is looking for you. So I said, okay, call him back. So when he called, he now told me that, Madam, we can't locate the Vice President's plane on the radar. So I said, have you checked with Nzuzu? What Nzuzu says, no, they can't also. I said, what about Kalonga and Likoma? So he said, let me check. So he called And then few minutes, like 10 minutes later, he called me back to report, no, those places, nothing. I said, what about neighboring countries like Mbeya in Tanzania and Mfue in Zambia? He then said, maybe we need foreign affairs. I said, no, you have no time for not verbals. To use your regional cooperation, arrangements, trigger them. So he went back, but it took him almost another 30 minutes or so. Then he called me that there's nothing in those two places as well. I said, then he says, but can you help us with maybe the CEOs of Airtel and TNM? Because using their towers, sometimes we can do what? We can follow, our contacts. But now, because it's now after 1, we've triggered rescue and search. Because the last communication was that they were around, would come in via northeast. They were 25 something nautical miles, that northeast Gwendeni side. So immediately I called Daud Suleiman, who's the DG of Makra, that can you link me to the 2 CEOs right now? He was on the way from Blanda going to Lilongwe, but he packed right away. We didn't even cut the phone. And within maybe 2 minutes or so, he had connected me with the 2 CEOs on his phone. So I told them that we are having an emergency. We can't locate the plane carrying the vice president. Can you help us understand through your towers? Mr. Kamoto, the Airtel, said, okay, get us the numbers of the people on board, but I have the VP and the Madam VP. At that point, I was not aware that Madam VP had not traveled. So that's when really I was now that this thing they still can't find in Karonga, they can't find in Mbeya, they can't find, that my whole office was there, and then now in my office, my team, and we're trying. So I called Mr. Sikwesi again. That was, I think, around 2, asking him to give me the manifest because we needed to communicate now to this the Airtel and TNM CEOs. So when he gave me the names, there were no phone numbers, and my team now were looking for the phone numbers. The first one was Lapken, because he's somebody my executive assistant linked often due to office matters. So it was, I have Lapken's number. So we got that one, called the CEO Airtel, gave him that, okay, he should check. And so it was now to and fro, because whatever numbers were being found, we're now communicating. The TNM number will send to the TNM, the Airtel numbers to Airtel. Whether there are 2 numbers of one person, we'll send both. So we're doing that to and fro. And then the CEO of Airtel called me that one of the phones, madam, was live around 12:30. I think 12:30, somewhere there. But it is showing a signal of reply tower. So immediately I called the airport commandant that one of the phones is showing a signal of reply tower. He was saying, okay, can you check with them? Maybe they can give us Google coordinates. But when I checked, he said no. When it's now on the tower is where there's a reply roadblock. So it would be 10 kilometers radius around that area. We are not able to establish the exact within that 10-kilometer radius. It should be possible. So I told the airport commandant again that I understand this 10-kilometer radius. I think it's at that point, that is now my thinking, at that point that now the search changed to go towards Chikangawa because of this new information we had from Airtel. But then the CEO said, I'm having confusion because Madam Mede's number seems to be showing Karonga. So I called the PS again, that where is Madam VP? Did she travel? They said, no, she didn't travel. So that's when I called back to clear that, no, leave that one. Apparently she didn't travel. So in that process, when I noticed also time was already coming into 2:30, 2:30, knowing that the president is scheduled to leave. So I now said, I better rush to State House to inform the president of the developments, which are unfolding in the country. I then called the IG of police. I said, can you please, I didn't disclose what it was. I just said emergency, please start off, let's meet at State House. I also called the commander, MTF, that emergency, please start off for State House, let's meet there. And then I called back the airport commandant to send me, I said, just write for me, whether it's in ink, just write for me and send on WhatsApp the time the plane left, when they communicated with Nzuzu, the time you were expecting them back, the information you have this far. So he was doing that while I was still communicating with the CO, COs, giving them the different numbers. And then the Inspector General called that, oh, I'm in State House, where are you? Then I started rushing there. I called the ADC that we want to see him. He was already out because they were preparing for travel. And that's when I mentioned that I understand the VP's plane is not found on the radar. So he also said, let me rush back to the office. So when I was entering the waiting room where the IG and the commander were, the CEO Airtel called me again and said, oh, we found another phone, which was also live, but it's also showing, one of the numbers was also showing reply tower. So at that point, I called the CEO reply, but he was in Lilongwe. But I informed him that we need help since they are having like 20,000 hectares at reply in the forest, and that there are experts moving around. So I said, can you please help us in case, he said they will use their drones and the like. And then, of course, the IG, the commander and myself, we then met the president and briefed him the developments which were unfolding in the country. And at that time, that's when the president directed that he should issue a press release to inform the nation, and that also he has cancelled his travel. And he also told me to have the emergency cabinet, but because several ministers were not around, somewhere traveling, we had now the emergency cabinet later in the night. But from that time now, it was making phones and following up while the siege was going on. So I think in summary, that's what I would say. The emergency cabinet took place in the night, and after that, the president addressed the nation. That was on Monday. On Tuesday, Honorable Chair and Committee, I went to the office. Of course, the ministers, but they were now assembling in OPC. This was like the central place. All of us, of course, hoping against hope. And I received a call, I think it was around 10 a.m. to go to State House. And it was only upon my arrival at State House that I was informed that the plane had been found and that all the people on board, we had lost them. Of course, it was a very difficult time. And I met the president. He made calls to the former presidents to inform them the tragedy. And also was preparing that he should inform the nation. Meanwhile, he directed me to call Honorable Minister of Health, Honorable Kumbise Kandolo, who came and met the president, and he instructed him to go and see the wife of late Vice President to notify her of the plane crash and that we've lost the Vice President. So she led a delegation which went to Madam Mary Chilima. Actually, the previous day, she also went with the Inspector General of Police. I personally also called the Chief of Protocol then in Ministry of Foreign Affairs that please make sure also the family of Deputy Chief of Protocol is informed, because we wanted them to know before the president addressing the nation. But obviously there was confusion. Maybe others may not have been informed. So later in the afternoon, after the president's address, of course, when the president addressed the nation, I mean, most of you were around. Emotions were very high. But later that day, we called a meeting of various government institutions, including the MTF, to discuss the logistics for the repatriation of the bodies from Chikangawa. We also, in my office now, we quickly did memos to propose a committee to the president, which would be in charge of coordinating all the logistics of the funerals and issues. And that committee was chaired by Honorable Titus Imvaro, who was the Minister of Justice. The MDF was the one handling the transportation of the bodies to Lilongwe, while the Minister of Health were the ones sorting out about ambulances, mortuaries, and all that. Initially, it was that it would be at Lilongwe Air Base, but since it was getting late, apparently I heard that I think the helicopters were fueling in Kasungu. It was that, no, it's better they just land at Kia, where there was proper lighting, as it was getting dark. So, of course, that night we all went to Kia, led by the president, to welcome the bodies of the people we had lost, including the vice president. I think in response to the summons and the chronology of the events, maybe at this point I can stop here. But of course there are events which followed the other days following this, but in terms of preparation up to the point the tragedy happened, this is where I would stop, Honorable Chairman and Committee. Thank you for listening. I submit.
Thank you, Ms. Colleen Zamba, for your elaborate presentation.